southwest monsoon is now in retreat, but it leaves wreckage behind in several states, showering the country's fields with the heaviest rainfall in nearly 25 years. The burst occurred after June when everyone was expecting deficit rainfall, calling upon the agriculture sector to brace for a subpar output. The resulting impact is visible. The prices of the existing produce in the market, onion prices for instance, have surged 200%, pushing retail inflation to the highest since July 2018. Help us understand the dynamics of this and the impact of this year's erratic rainfall on the crop pattern. Let's welcome in former member of the erstwhile Planning Commission, Abhijit Sen. Mr. Sen, thanks so much for taking the time out. You would have seen countless such instances wherein monsoon has been erratic, just that for a lot of people who are seeing this not such a long time back, you have seen a deficit rainfall at the start only to see it compound and get exaggerated in the ensuing period. How do you foresee the impact of all of this on crop prices and the economy?
On prices, well, the rainfall has been very erratic. It was a horrible June, and it's been a very copious September and October. The effect on output still for Kharif is a bit uncertain. For Rabi, this should be very good because reservoir levels are extremely good. As far as prices go, that should follow output. So from Rabi onwards, prices should be good come down in Rabi. About Kharif prices, I'm not entirely sure. It'll depend on the crop. There are certain crops which have been hit badly because of the low rainfall earlier in the monsoon season. Others might recover because of the high rainfall, but I think on the whole, I think the situation on the output side is very uncertain for Kharif, and therefore but generally, in the price situation, the big issue is not related to the monsoon, it's related to the markets.
Mm-hmm. And would you elaborate on that, sir? Based on what you're seeing right now, are we entering a worrying period, or do you reckon that steps are possible to be taken with regards to the market situation in order to normalize whatever issues there might be?
No, see, the point is that we are going through a peculiar phase where on the one hand, farmers complain, and rightly so, that the price that they get is just simply not enough. So generally, there is a complaint across the country on low farm prices that the farmers are getting. And this affects output that they produce, their consumption, their demand for industrial goods, everything. On the other hand, in certain goods, notably very strongly in the case of onion, you got the government suddenly very, very concerned about urban onion prices and went on an export ban, which is actually reacting almost knee-jerk fashion to a rise in prices which can have urban inflation. And underneath this all, there is a fact, and it's an important fact which I've not noticed for a very long time, which is if you look at the rural CPI food and compare it with the urban CPI food, for the last 8 months or so, urban CPI food has been inflation has been increasing. The rural CPI food is either flat or maybe slightly coming down. Now, this might simply reflect the fact that rural incomes are doing worse than urban incomes. But whatever it is asking the question, what's happening to our markets? Why aren't they integrated more? Why aren't urban prices flowing down to the rural areas? Or why are urban prices not signaling a supply from the low-priced rural supplies to the more high-priced urban supplies? And it shows that something's wrong with the market. And my guess is it's got something to do with the fact that the cash economy is struggling. And I mean the cash economy.
Right. Mr. Sen, so what does it do for the future output? And do you feel, irrespective of what core inflation does, and even if in the year you do see core inflation coming off, food inflation could continue to remain high, which then again should improve terms of trade for farmers?
See, as I said, I mean, the point is that inflation is not the cause for worry for the economy in general, and even for the food economy at the moment. In fact, somewhat higher prices for food would be good for farmers. It's not as if, except for one or two, I mean, suddenly some vegetables somewhere prices shoot up, but that's common if you have got horrible rainfall, if transports are cut off. So that part I can understand. But what I cannot understand, and I think this should actually make a lot of people think, is something is going wrong between the way rural prices are behaving and the way urban prices are behaving. It has to do with market integration. And this little puzzle is not so little if you think in terms of the bigger all-India problem of the economy, which is consumer demand. Because if it continues like this, you will, on the one hand, have nothing propelling rural demand, which depends upon what farmers get. And on the other hand, if you're too bothered about inflation, which hopefully people will not be, you'll be trying to actually cut down whatever stimulus, fiscal or monetary, that you might be otherwise thinking.
Mr. Sen, aside from that, we've been talking a whole lot about how rural inflation is also a function of how much the farmer actually gets in his hand. And to that extent, a slightly higher rural inflation may mean that there is more money going into the hands of the farmer, which again, in a way, transitions to spending power in the rural economy. So does that blend well, according to you?
Well, that's obviously happening. Whether it blends well or not, I don't know what it's supposed to blend well with, but that's what's happening. And I think it is something which one should, I think what has happened to some extent, quite apart from dislocations caused by very uneven rainfall, which has happened in many places. Those really cause supply chains to break down, and it causes assumptions which farmers or traders might have made also to break down. So these are uncertainties which come and go, and they get exaggerated when you've got such weird rainfall situations as we've seen this year. But that apart, I think what we are also seeing is the effect of that trying to move towards a cashless economy is having on the rural market and on the food market in particular.
Mr. Sen,
and I think that's something which nobody is really talking about, which is why I want to actually push that one.
No, sure. So let's, the final question on this is, I just guess that the extent in terms of the time taken for this impact to wear off is anybody's guess, because we've now started or tried to move towards this cashless economy for a while. People anticipated the impact will be short-lived, and it's not short-lived, it's still continuing, and it's very difficult, I believe, to assess when it will stop impacting.
Yeah, I don't know. I seriously think that there is something out there which some people are ignoring, but even those like me who are not ignoring it are a bit uncertain about what exactly it is. We've got some idea, but I think we have not had the sort of discussion on this matter, which in an economy like India's is a big issue. And at the back of all this, mind you, the FCI is sitting with huge stocks. And so if the government has to actually come in, say in the Rabi season, to do higher procurement to keep farm prices up, it'll find that its stocking space with the FCI is virtually nil. So, I mean, there are clouds in the wind which makes me think that this is not something which will just go away. It will just, tide over.
How prolonged a problem is this in your opinion, Mr. Sen?
Which one? How long will it go on?
Yes.
I couldn't get your question.
With regards to the overall, issues that we just highlighted, because of these erratic rainfalls and the cashless economy and the differential between the rural and the urban pricing, how long do you think that that disparity will continue to weigh in?
I think it's going to continue. I think it's going to continue unless we can get a sense on the pulse of what is it that the market is being unable to do. And I think is it simply a question of infrastructure? Is it simply a question of market reforms? Is it a question of something to do with what we have ended up doing with, on the one hand, a cash economy, on the other, a certain feeling amongst a lot of traders that trade is more risky today for both, for reasons of both the way the weather is behaving as well as how the government is behaving.
Okay. Well, we hope the situation normalizes sooner than what we all anticipated to, or if we can anticipate in the first place. But thank you so much, Mr. Sen, for joining in today and giving us your thoughts. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
That's Abhijit Sen. No clear answers really, but can't blame anybody because it's just very difficult to get answers to some of these issues at hand. Let's see, erratic rainfall, though, I mean, we wanted to do a longer conversation on the rainfall and the impact thereof, but clearly Abhijit Sen believes that the bigger problem is not the rainfall and therefore the impact on prices, but what's happening to the market structure. And it doesn't seem too concerned about the impact of these uptick in prices in onions and other factors and other products on inflation. So that may not really remain a worry. Just quick highlights on the markets before we move on. Mind you, we haven't done too much precious little. The Nifty Bank is helped by what's happening to a couple of heavyweights like HDFC Bank and Kotak Bank. So they are trading in the green. And then some of the energy stocks are the ones which are still trading well. So the likes of Indian Oil and BPCL are doing well. But the broader end of the spectrum, Devina, is where the action seems to be. Yesterday it was Adani Gas, today it's Adani Transmission. That stock is up as the second best performer. And then yesterday it was IRCTC, today it's ITDC as the best performer, up about 10%. Needless to say, ITDC was up about 15% in yesterday's session as well. And in today's session is up about 10%. So really strong show by all these names. And then JSW Energy chips in, coupled with Info Edge, which is, I think with this move, trading close to life highs. So do watch out for that one as well. And the ones which are moving, the likes of Spandana Spurti, Fine Organics, which is at 19.15. So that's trading at fresh highs. And mind you, Asian Paints from the index has inched up and is trading at fresh life highs for itself at about 18.21. Affle India is the other one which is doing well for itself.
And let's pull up DLF as well to see how that stock's been doing. Yesterday's trade saw it move up about 6%. The company has sold 376 ready-to-move in luxury flats worth 700 crore rupees in the first week after the launch of its new housing project in Gurgaon. Does the management see this as a sign of revival in the residential property demand? Let's ask DLF Senior Executive Director for Marketing and Sales, Akash Ohri, who's joining us right now on the phone line. Akash, thanks very much for taking out the time. Are you seeing trends in the residential market picking up? Because up until now, the focus had completely directed itself towards what commercial real estate has been doing, which has been surpassing the overall demand and the growth for many developers like yourself.
Yeah, thanks. As I said to somebody yesterday as well, that what's happening is that I see the change. People were always, real estate, and especially the residential real estate, has been in our DNA for a long time. So I don't think anybody can take that out. But because of what happened in the industry in the past 5 years, I think people got pretty wary. and took their monies out and put them in various other or the other opportunities that they had. So today, what we see is that if you have a good product and you can take it to the customer, you can bring it there, bring it out. I think people are more than happy to go back and make investments in real estate. So that I see that. I mean, apart from just the humongous response that we got from the brokering community, what also happened was, and is happening as I speak to you, is people taking out time to go and see. So the customer, in spite of everything else, still wants to go see the product and everything because of the trust deficit. But I think it's going pretty well.
But, what happens to the already stocked up inventory? Is that moving along?
Which stock up and inventory? In
the system, not just for DLF, for the industry as a whole, for residential projects.
As I said, this is a completely it's a very bold move to construct and sell. So if others follow, I think the only way to remove this trust deficit will be when people complete their products and bring it out in the market. So when somebody is buying something, they're buying a tangible product and not just dreams. So I think people should. Our industry is pretty happy with what they saw in the last couple of days, and it's not about DLF alone. I think everybody else, I'm sure, will follow. So, I mean, you see this kind of a response, and you only saw that maybe a decade back. So I think everybody's pretty excited.
Akash, good morning. Neeraj here. Was this Ultima project being sold only to actual users, or were you also selling to investors?
See, what happens is the good part today is that mostly there are actual users. And unlike earlier, where most of the investors used to come into the market, but here it's a extremely healthy mix of both the communities, and that's what's happened. So I think because of whatever the product is saying, and obviously the price points, the kind of response that one is getting is both. But what we did was we limited our exposure and curtailed that to a very healthy mix of primarily retail and then the other. So investors also are, if there is somebody who's buying it, he's buying it for maybe his company or extended family and all, as they know the price is extremely lucrative.
Mm-hmm. So, but what proportion was this? 75-25, or in favor of actual users, or different than that? Any guesstimate?
No, actually, I'd say that today we have I'd say almost if you see it,
alone,
it'll almost be maybe. Can you hear me?
Yeah, for Ultima alone, it would have been 75-25 actual user investor, or would it be different?
No, it'll be different. It'll be about 60-40, I think.
Okay, 60-40.
The actual numbers we're still compiling.
No, the reason, Akash, you appreciate, the only reason why I asked this is because I presume that you've launched, I think 376 units of launch inventory was sold. I presume you would have a phase 2 and a phase 3 as well. I'm wondering if the investor inventory comes along with in the market, or does that only happen post the project is completely constructed?
So the project is completely constructed. You're now giving them about 4 to 6 months of handover. So that's the time that people, get their funds together, get their bank loans and everything else. So there I don't see a problem. So this is not going to be, these are not those kind of investors that you may be investing to who have a 5-year horizon or 3-year horizon. This is just going to be converted in a matter of months. So I don't think it's going to be lucrative for those kind of investors. That's what I'm understanding you saying.
Yes.
So it's the good part is it's hardcore consumers. It's people who want to live there or want to take this as their home or want to take it as for leasing purposes. As they see a lot of commercial boom around that area, they know residential is going to follow. With American Express making that big announcement, moving their campus there. And so all that, it's all going to be very demand-driven.
Just one last question, Akash, before we wind up on this conversation quickly. I mean, up until now, conversations around affordable housing was that, that segment is doing okay for itself. There's not much of, a real demand issue or a pain point there. But for luxury housing, particularly in the metros, that's where the little bit of slack has come in. Do you see that changing?
See, luxury has always been price inelastic if you see the trends. We've been, whether super luxury, what we've been doing, has been doing well over the past, I'd say definitely a couple of years. And but luxury right now, I'd say this again to you, that there is still a market, a good market, and people have the money. If you bring in a good product and at a good price, it definitely will be picked up. And second, most important thing there is the location. So the infrastructure developments around that area are doing pretty well at a reasonable pace. There's a sizable amount of people who are living there. There are some reports I was seeing the other day which has put the new Gurgaon second to Gurgaon in terms of preference of living. So I think it's, you can't just do anything in isolation. It has to be a combination of a lot of things. And I see luxury definitely being the, I'd say, doing well. But again, I'd say that with caution. You have to make the product first. You have to put it out there. And the specs and everything will have to be pretty well defined. So there are enough takers. Let me tell you this very clearly. There are enough takers for good products.
Got that. Akash, we'll leave it at that. Thank you very much for joining us this morning with your thoughts.
Thank you.
All right, so no issue with regards to demand, whether it be, in the affordable market or even in the luxury market, according to the management at DLF. But the markets for themselves trading up by about 40-odd points on the Nifty. Nifty Bank up about 200 points. We're going to leave it on that note right here on Indian Open. It's a goodbye from me to myself and the entire team. Coming up next is the F&O Show.
आइए इन्वेस्ट कीजिए इन मैग्निफिसेंट मध्य प्रदेश।